Just like me, you're best as you fall through my heaven. On my back, dressed as my boss.
Prologue. As soon as Joseph set foot on the spongy grass of At, he knew his life would change. This could be because At had purposely refrained from developing into a technologically advanced sector like the rest of Gyre, or could simply be the vague premonition that this is where he would bleed to death from an accidental stab wound caused by falling on an open kitchen blade before the day ended. His family had just moved from So due to occupational arrangements, and as usual, Joseph and his 6 siblings were dragged along against their wills, having to start all over to try to fit in. At's air smelled clean, unlike the smoggy air of Bai or the farm manure stench of Tu. The village was small, but not unlively. The streets were for the most part unpaved, but smoothed over so that the carriages could roll easily. Joseph had heard that At was known for their advanced transportation, but he had never seen beaver-drawn carriages before. These were the biggest beavers he'd ever seen. They were the size of bears, though Joseph had never seen a real bear up close either. This was another thing he was looking forward to. At, unlike any city in all of Gyre, had their very own zoo. People flocked from all over to see it. His mother had promised to take the kids to see it shortly after they got settled into their new home. A beaver buggy took them to a small apartment building, 3 stories high. This wasn't like the tall office blocks on Bai, but perhaps it would prove to be cozier. He helped his family haul the bags up to the 2nd floor. Joseph, the youngest at 17, was the first to finish, for he had the least amount of personals. He found that with each move, he left more and more behind. Nothing seemed of value anymore. While his brothers and sisters tried to make their corners of the rooms fit their needs, Joseph was left to journey around the new city. "Don't go too far," said his mother. He nodded and walked downstairs and out onto the gravel streets. Joseph admired the circus tree that At was famous for and the fountains in the road. The water wasn't clean, but it was the thought that counted. He was surprised to find so many people bustling about outside in the middle of the day. It seemed as though no one worked, which would probably explain why his father had gotten the job so quickly. The job was a simple one, but one no one wanted. It paid fair enough, and all he had to do was bury the dead. Joseph found a comfortable spot under a shady circus tree that overlooked the whole town from atop a hill in a park called Piece of String. "Hey, kid, find your own spot." Joseph turned to see a man a few years older than himself.
"Oh, sorry. I could have sworn there was no one else around. I didn't even see you. You blend with the shadows pretty well."
"Takes practice." The tall, muscular man wore dark gray, head to toe, though his skin was too pale to have ever seen daylight, and his hair was as black as onyx. "You new here?"
"Yeah, I just moved here today. My parents and my 6 brothers and sisters just moved into the apartment over there."
Joseph pointed, but the man didn't look. 6 brothers and sisters. I suppose you had a lot of hair as a baby too, huh?
"What?"
Never mind. He held out a hand, fingernails painted dark gray. "Name's Ray. Ray Ravi."
"I'm Joseph."
He shook Ray's hand. "What do you do, Joseph?"
"I go to school, but I'm going to be a writer."
"High aspirations. You think At is inspiring enough?"
"Sure. I've never seen anywhere like this before, and I've seen almost everywhere all over Gyre. I'm going to see the zoo later today. I've never seen most animals before."
Ray waved a hand, turning away. "Don't bother. No one wants caged animals. It's cruel what they do, and they're not all animals either. It would be kind enough to rip them of their lives suddenly and painlessly. But to cage them, starve them, and set them on display for public gawking is a slow and painful way to shrivel a soul."
"Wow, I guess I never really thought about it."
"I'm betting there's a lot of things you never really thought about."
"Like what?"
"You'll see," he said, starting to walk away. "Trust me, you will see." It was a night burial. Joseph's 6 siblings, his mother and his father, the undertaker, stood at the grave, mourning the way funeral mourners do. More importantly, they mourned the way a family does after losing a brother and son. The casket was open, and the full moon cast its loving gaze on the fallen boy. Joseph's face was pallid, eyes shut, pale lips sealed. He wore a suit, one his father had bought with the year's income. His limp arms crossed his chest and his legs were straight, fitting perfectly into his coffin. Having only recently moved to At, the family and the preacher were the only ones standing around the grave. A mound of dirt had to have been made before digging the hole, for penetrating too deeply into the surface of the ground was outlawed in At. Joseph's parents couldn't bear to cremate their son the way the rest of At would have done. No headstone lay there yet, but Joseph's father had been sure to make this the most perfect, squarish hole he'd ever dug, and tears were shed into it. "May Marcy watch over you now," said the preacher. Joseph's father had never been a strong believer in Marcy, but now that his boy was supposedly in her care, he hoped she existed, for Joseph's sake. What no mourner, nor even the dead, did notice was one figure attending the funeral that was not gathered around the plot. Raymond Raby stood in the night, out of the sight of the moon, under a circus tree near some graves of other acquaintances. This man did not mourn, and although his expression showed absolutely nothing, he rejoiced inside. He'd liked this Joseph kid, and he didn't want him to move away with his family the next time his father got a new job. And now he never would. Joseph's mother had lost all will to control her emotions. This was a woman who was proud of her appearance, as the world saw her. But tonight, her eyeliner ran down her cheeks, and her shoulders shook with soundless sobs of despair. Joseph had been their youngest, far too small and innocent to die, a genius writer, and a smile that lit the world, though not tonight. She pulled the small mirror from her purse and turned away from the scene, unable to see her son in this state any longer. Looking at her own reflection in the mirror, she used her sleeve to dab away the splotches of running makeup. In the mirror she saw her son once again and broke out into more extreme grieving. Her husband wrapped his arms around her and told the preacher to close the coffin. Not far off, Ray was up to something. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small cat. It was dark-furred and yellow-eyed. He'd killed a man to rescue it from the zoo. It purred at him lovingly, enjoying the touch of his cold hand. He lowered it to the ground and gave it a little toss forward so that it would run. And run it did. Across the green grass it ran, jumping over old graves, bounding over short headstones, and then leaping across Joseph's grave, just as they were lowering his coffin down. The cat ran off into the night. Ray missed the kitten already.